that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, I will rejoice and be glad in it, and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day, this is the day that the Lord has made. Amen. You may be seated. All right, Jacob, is my mic on here, the blue one?
Yes, no.
It's on? Okay. How about all of them on, I guess? All right. One of the great joys of my life, I always loved singing, but I came out of high school. When I got saved, I was convinced I couldn't carry a tune in a bushel basket. And I really did, I believed that. But I got to Southland and some people started listening and said, no, you're wrong about that. You can. And wasn't long till they put me in some music groups. And I thought they must really have a tin ear. They can't hear me. But I wanted to sing so bad that when given the opportunity, I took whatever opportunity they gave. And then I wanted to learn to sing harmony. And the only way I could do that, because I could try to follow the notes, but the way I did it was on Sunday nights, they let us sit with somebody special. Well, it didn't take me long to have somebody special, because she was there. And I would sit there Sunday nights and I said, sing the tenor so I can learn to follow those notes. And she would sing the tenor, and I'd learn to sing harmony. And little did I realize, I even had at one time a well-meaning preacher who said, you know, you got to make up your mind whether your ministry is music or preaching. And I tried to. So I tried to resist from the singing and focus on the preaching. And everywhere we went, even if they didn't know we sang, if they had a congregational song, then right after that, the preacher said, y'all sound pretty good. Why don't you come sing for us, you know? And so we got into singing. And I want you to know.
I had been singing.
Oh, yeah, you were singing from the time you were 3. You were anticipating singing with me. I know that. You were already thinking about me. But nonetheless, um, I loved the singing. And I loved it even more when I got to sing with my family. And so we're going to sing one.
Where's the rest of them?
We got them. Jake, right here in front of us. Go ahead. Just inside the eastern gate, in the ready faithful pilgrim, let's make you with me to live. Just inside the eastern gate. Well, I always hope that folks get a blessing when we sing. But I'm going to tell you something. Singing with my family, I'd sing whether you got a blessing or not. Because I get a blessing. I love singing with my family. And I have loved singing with my dear wife all these years together. I like music. Sometimes I come across a song that the melody can be beautiful. But sometimes some of these songs today I just don't like. Well, I was listening to gospel music on the way to church this morning, and I liked the songs they were singing, but I didn't like the way they were singing them, and so I turned it off. But there's a song written way back in the 70s by a fellow by the name of Peter Yarrow. Now, you would know him, but you don't know him by that name. You know the group by Peter, Paul, and Mary. All right, not my Marys. That was another one back then. All right, but the song described a love triangle. Now, I don't know about you, but I hear songs there sometimes, and like I said, I like the melody, but I just don't like the subject of the song. If you remember this, the song, torn between two lovers and all that. And the song has a couple of lines in it. That line right there, torn between two lovers. And then another line says, loving you both is breaking all the rules. Well, it's not only breaking the rules, it's idiocy. and it's a lie, because you can't take a triangle, a love triangle, and say you love two people the same. No, somebody's going to have priority. It was number one on the U.S. pop charts. It was number one on the easy listening charts. Both of those were in 1967 or 66 and 67. And the song claims to love both lovers. But now she loved the first one, but now she has taken a second and says she loves him just as much. And the song says he shouldn't feel bad because she still loves him just as much. And I don't know about you, but folks, I just had a problem with that song. There's something very disturbing, though, about a song that can hit number one spot that's talking about that kind of relationship. I'm kind of a selfish guy, I guess, because I'm not going to have a love and share her. Never had to. Had her all my life. And what? She said you wanted to live. Yes, I wanted to live. That's true. That's true. God warns us about trying to love the things of earth and the things of heaven. And we can't do that. He warns us to lay our treasures up in heaven and not on earth. He warns that earthly treasures fade away. He warns that the earthly treasures corrupt and they can corrupt the heart. He warns us to attach our affections to eternal things. Matthew 6:24. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one, that means one of them's going to be loved less, okay, and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot love both. You will love one less and the other with greater intensity. And we have plenty of examples in the scriptures of those who try to love two things and give two things priority. Now, I always told my children, and I love my children dearly, but we raised them with something in mind that I know psychologists today tell us, oh, no. Children have to know they are central in your life. No, they don't. Number one in both of us was our love for the Lord Jesus Christ. Number two was for each other. And I used to, the kids would crowd in between us, but jokingly I said, hey, she's still number one, and always will be. But they knew they were a strong number three in our lives. They knew that. If you try to have the world and the Lord at the same time, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have conflict. And you will literally be torn between two lovers. And we have so many examples like that. If you try, you're going to see so many examples. Ananias and Sapphira. Here we are. They are torn between two lovers, trying to love Christ, but wanting and desiring the prestige of the world, you see. In Acts chapter 5, believers were experiencing a tremendous persecution, and much of that persecution was along economic lines, you see. And they were driven from their homes. Well, other Christians who had more were giving to help those who were suffering. And Barnabas gave a large amount. Well, Ananias and Sapphira saw what Barnabas was doing, and they saw how others honored him. Well, honors didn't affect Barnabas. Barnabas was such a godly man. He didn't react to them. Ananias and Sapphira, they wanted the honor. They wanted the prestige. They wanted people looking at them and saying, aren't they wonderful couple? Aren't they spiritually inclined? And we honor them for their generosity. And of course, you know the story. Having given only part of the profit from the sale of their property, they lied to Peter, claiming they had given all of that. And the thing of it is, it was theirs. God didn't tell them they had to give it all. All right? So as long as it was there, God said, give what your heart tells you. Their sin was lying to get the prestige. Their sin was lying because of their pride and ego. And they tried to have God, and they tried to have that prestige at the same time. George Gallup is famous for his polling company that he founded and operates. And he was addressing Southern Baptists, a huge Southern Baptist meeting. And he makes this statement. Now, this is interesting. He said, we find there is very little difference in ethical behavior between churchgoers and those who are more active, who are not active religiously. The levels of lying and cheating and stealing are remarkably similar in both groups. That ought not to be. It ought not to be that way. He went on to say that 8 of 10 Americans consider themselves Christians, and yet only about half of them could identify the person who gave the Sermon on the Mount. I want you to shout it out together. Everybody all right? Who gave the Sermon on the Mount? Say it. Jesus. I didn't hear a single Moses or Abraham in there. Everybody said Jesus. You're a knowledgeable church. Fewer still could recall 5 of the 10 commandments. I'm not going to test you. Who knows? You could probably get out 5 of them. I think this group could. But only 2 in 10 would be willing to suffer persecution for their faith. Ananias and Sapphira wanted what God had to offer, but they still wanted what the world had to offer. And the Bible's right. You cannot love both and have and choose one or the other. You're going to have to choose one or the other. Balaam was another one, torn between 2 lovers, wanting God's blessing, the wealth, and all of that, but he kind of wanted to stay with the ministry that God had given him. Numbers 22. And we can see the inner struggle in this whole story of Balaam, where he first starts out trying to, I have to do what's right here. But, you see, the devil knows. Here's the thing. If the devil recognizes in you a tendency toward this, he isn't going to offer something once. He's going to offer it more and more and more, because if he does it often enough, sooner or later you'll rationalize, or you'll think, well, okay, I can do this, and God won't be too upset with me or something. Why? Because the flesh wants both. You want God and you want the world. And folks, that can't work. It doesn't work. Balaam turns down their offer to begin with, and they send. Then Balak sends a higher-ranking officers to offer even more to him. Balaam prays about it. By the way, Balaam, he didn't have to pray about it. He already knew. I've had people say, well, I'm praying about this or that. And I wanted to look at him and say, hey, you don't have to pray about that. Had a young lady in our church in North Carolina. She had been married twice, divorced twice. In both cases, she'd had to put out a restraining order on him. She came to me one Sunday, and she didn't come very often, but she came one Sunday standing in the middle aisle, and she looked at me and she said, I'm getting married again. She was happy. I said, really? Well, who is this guy you're marrying? And I said, when are you getting married? She said, well, he's somebody I met. And I said, when are you getting married? She said, well, when he gets out of prison. And I stood there and I looked at her. And I said, honey, you're headed for another divorce. And you're probably headed for another restraining order. And I think she wanted approval. I'm sorry, I'm too honest a pastor. Don't ask me for approval on things that are clearly not God's will. Because I'll tell you the truth. She started crying. Never came back to our church. I'm sorry. But folks, sometimes people look at a pastor and they want some kind of approval for what they're doing instead of just look at the scripture and do what it says. Balaam was being torn between 2 lovers. His love, he wanted that wealth, but he wanted God's blessings too. And he had to battle between that. And folks, it's not going to work. Third time, hey, you know the story. God kept trying to speak. He finally had to use a dumb animal to speak to him because Balaam didn't have enough sense to understand that God was trying to speak to him. It's a rule of life that is clearly evident. If the devil detects any weakness in your resolve to obey God, he will continue to put temptation in front of you to break down that resolve. Balaam was torn between two lovers. The devil knew it, and he was going to keep working on that. The Bible is, again, right. You cannot love both. You're going to make a decision. You have to. Rich young ruler had the same problem. Claimed to be godly. He claimed he'd obey all those rules and loved Jesus. But when faced with the choice between God and his wealth, he took his wealth. He came to Jesus, desired to know how to get to heaven. Jesus knew the heart of the young man, and so he pinpointed the very thing that he knew came ahead of God, came before him. Torn between God and his wealth, and God immediately put his finger on the wealth because he knew that is where the priority was. Why would Jesus require him to give up wealth? Is wealth wrong? No, it's not wrong. But he knew right away that the priority was the wealth. But he liked to have Jesus too. Too bad you can't have both. I don't want both. I'd rather have him. I've had, I look at my income and what wealth I have, and I find that I won't have much to discard from this life when I die and go to heaven. They have some old suit. I hope it's a future suit. I hope these are worn out before I go. But they'll put some sort of suit on me, a tie and shirt. And that'll be the only thing I take into the grave with me. And folks, you say, are you regretting that? I don't have much more than that now, but nonetheless, I don't need all these things. When this body dies, I don't need anything I've got here. Nothing. I've already got the things I'm going to need on the other side. 3 of them are sitting right there. I'm going to need them on the other side. I thank God for that. Matthew chapter 19, verse 21. And Jesus said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, he said, sell all that thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. He wasn't saying you're going to get there by wealth. He was saying when the relationship with Christ becomes more important to you and more valuable to you than anything else, then the relationship's right. The rich young ruler was torn between his two loves, the love of wealth and ease and the love of Christ. And he chose the love of wealth. John Mark had the same problem. Now, John Mark was saved, but John Mark went into the service of Christ thinking, this is going to be wonderful. John Mark graduated from his little Bible college the same way some people do today. When my pastor preached my graduation from Southland Bible Institute in 1968, he made a couple of statements that stuck with me. There were 10 of us in that graduating class, and 3 of us were out of his church. And he looked down and he said, you're going to have some heartaches, and you're going to have some stress in ministry. And then he looked at me and he said, some of mine are right here. Did you get that? He looked right at me when he said that. And I look back and I think I know the kind of heartache and stress. Now, having done it for 61 years, I think I know the kind of heartache and stress I created for him, even to the years before I got saved. But I'm going to tell you something, folks. He also made this statement. He said, you need to understand, the world needs you, but they don't want you. They don't want you. Boy, I found that to be so true over these years. The world needs what we have, but they don't want to hear it from you. The only way that's going to happen is if you're faithful to give it and ask God's Holy Spirit to work. I think of John Mark. Served, he wanted to serve, but then he didn't realize that's going to cost him something. In Acts 13:13, and when Paul and his company loosed from Paphos, they came to Perga in Pamphylia, and John departed from them and returned to Jerusalem. Why? Well, ministry's not as much fun as I thought it was. It's hard. It's difficulty. To say nothing of the livelihood and the lack of, you're not usually going to get wealthy in the ministry unless you're a TV evangelist or something, but nonetheless, you're not going to get wealthy. But you're not only going to have that struggle, you're going to have other struggles, because sometimes your friends in the ministry aren't going to understand what you do. Other pastors. I've had pressure put on me from other pastors, other preachers. It's almost like, well, you're not going to do it the way we do it. Well, then you're wrong, and you're walking disobedient to God. So if you want that, there's your choice, torn between two lovers. You know, sometimes it's with some people, it's hard to quit something, and you have to keep stressing, keep pressing, keep trying to go forward. And when you go forward, God blesses. Henry Ford was a man who he just never allowed opposition to his doubts to stop him. He invented a revolutionary new kind of engine. He thought it was a great idea. He wanted to put it into production, and he said to his men, draw up the plans for it. And he presented it to the engineers. The engineers studied the drawings, and they looked at them, and they said, this is not going to work. But how do you tell the boss? How do you tell Henry Ford his idea is not going to work? It's impossible. So finally, he said, we're going to have to be very delicate in how we tell him this. So they approached him about it. He said, well, do it anyway. Try it anyway. Keep working on it. They worked on it 6 months. It came back. They still said it won't work. He said, I'm telling you, it will work. You go back and work on it until you get it. If I understood the whole story, they got it. It is the 8-cylinder engine in your car. All right? It worked. They finally got it right. And sometimes people don't have enough determination to move forward when things get a little tough. John Mark, he stepped aside. He quit. Diotrephes wanted to serve Jesus, but Diotrephes also wanted to be the center of attention and authority. Do you know who Diotrephes was? In 3 John chapter 1, verse 9, I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have the preeminence among them, receiveth us not. I'm going to tell you something, folks. In the ministry, I have had more problems and opposition from Christians in churches, sometimes deacons, not ours, but sometimes deacons who loveth to have the preeminence. They wanted to be the leader. And I've seen more problems come out of that, and I never find them. If they want to have the leadership and the church wants them to lead, that's fine. I don't need to be there. When the church wants proper leadership, that's where I want to be. He said in this verse, in verse 9 of 3 John chapter 1, I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have the preeminence among them, receiveth us not. Wherefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he doeth, prating against us with the malicious words, and not content therewith, neither doth he himself receive the brethren, and forbiddeth them that come that would, and casteth them out of the church. So here's a man who said, I run this church. No man says that. Better not say it here, because we don't run this church. We try to do what God says. But here's Diotrephes. He's known deacons. I've known deacons who were Diotrephes. I have known pastors who were Diotrephes. I have known teachers, Sunday school teachers, who were Diotrephes. I have known members of church who were Diotrephes, that they all wanted focused on the G. Gordon Liddy, one of the Watergate conspirators. He went to prison for it, but he was one who never gave up any others. He refused to say anything. But here's the arrogance and pride. When he got out of prison, he made this statement. He said, I have found within myself all I need and all I ever shall need. I am a man of great faith, but my faith is in George Gordon Liddy. I have never failed me. What arrogance. When we decide, say, Lord, yeah, I'd like to have you, but I'm going to have me too. And I'm going to have both. No, you're not. You're going to have to decide. Diotrephes was torn between two lovers, and he chose himself. And the Bible is right. You cannot love both, and you have to choose one or the other. Here's my question. Are you torn between two lovers? You love the Lord? And I've got a question for you. Is there anything else in your life that you think contends for that top spot? I hope not. Colossians 1:18, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence, that he might have top spot, no one else, nothing else. So what's your priority? Christ, career. By the way, as great as family is, don't let it be number one. You see, because family is only in the proper place when it's second to him. And if you get it out of line, right, you ever try to put a transmission or back together, and I did that one time. I was changing the rear brakes on my car. I made the mistake of taking the rear brakes off, brake shoes off, of both back wheels. And then I couldn't remember how all those springs went in there. I had to go get a neighbor to come and help me get them back on properly. I learned very quickly, one at a time. You take care of these and these over here. Because see, if you get that spring in the wrong place, hooked to something, then nothing else fits. Let me tell you something. When you get family out of proper order, then everything doesn't work. Nothing works. Everything is out of place. Joshua had it right. And Joshua, I always told my kids, our home is not a democracy, it was a benevolent dictatorship. Joshua did the same thing. Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Did you see that? As far as what his family was going to do, Joshua said, my house doesn't get a choice. God's made me the head of this home, and my house is going to focus on serving God. So preacher said, that's pretty dictatorial. Yeah. I always told my kids, our house, our family, at best is a benevolent dictatorship. We're going to do what God says. We're going to live by God's standards. I hope that your priorities are right. I hope that you, and you've made it clear to your family. I'm not just talking about raising your children or grandchildren. I'm talking about your whole family. It's strange when somebody says to me, oh, we had family in on that Sunday, so we couldn't come to church. I hate to say it, but that sounds a little bit like you're giving priority to the family. I was a preacher. My family learned very quickly that if they're going to come and visit us on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night or a Wednesday night, my response is, make yourself at home. We'll be back when the service is over. That's the way it was. My oldest one visited with the family one time. I don't remember the circumstances, but she got home and she said, Daddy, we're sitting there just trying to decide if they were going to church. And she looked at me and she said, I didn't know it was an option. It never was in our home. Dads, I encourage you, make sure that your home, in your home, he's number one. Christ is number one. Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. Brother Ken, would you close in prayer, please?